welcome to the Improv Summit. As always, I'm your host, Spencer, and with me today I have a very special guest. Now, I always say everyone's a very special guest, and I truly mean it, but I've started doing the improv thing where I take the first person's name, take the first letter of their first name, and give them an adjective to describe this person as I introduce them. So today, we have none other than the very special guest that is Grown-Up Greg.
Wow. Thank you.
I was either thinking grown-up or gorgeous, and then I was like, I'll go with grown-up, I guess.
Either way, I'm shook. Thank you very much.
It was, for some reason, it was very difficult to... I by the way, I do improvise these as I'm introducing the guest.
Oh, great, yeah.
Like, today I have a guest who is very special, and that very special guest is none other than... Because I couldn't think of a G adjective.
Whenever I do that, I often go for gangly.
Oh, okay.
That's sort of the go-to whenever I do like the thumper or whatever it's called.
Yeah. Mine is always Super Spencer.
Oh, yeah, that's fun. That's fun.
Always mine. My other favorite was there's another Spencer in my class, and it was like Super Spencer and like Slippery Spencer.
Spooky, weird,
and I was
yeah.
like, that's so interesting. Anyways, enough about me. I've said this like 85 times on this show by now, even though I haven't had 85 episodes, but who's counting? That being said, my producer is... Oh, wait, I'm the producer. Wow, what do you know? Let's talk about you, Greg, and your relationship to improv. What is your improv experience?
I kind of fell in love with improv. I suppose I had always sort of casually loved it without exactly knowing what it was since I was a kid. When I was a kid, I was really into comedy. There was a lot of absorbing of stand-up comedy, like Steve Martin's comedy specials were very important to me. That kind of turned into the love of comedy films, which turned into the love of SNL, which turned into the love of watching Whose Line Is It Anyway? And I kind of was always interested in quote-unquote being funny and doing funny stuff. I don't think I put the name and the techniques of like improv comedy until early college, I would say, when I kind of discovered what improv and sketch comedy means to perform, to study, to influence all of these other forms of comedy, storytelling, and expression. And in college, I was in a couple of groups. I was in one called the Improfessionals, which is a pretty classic college improv team name.
Yeah, good pun.
Good pun. I kind of helped... So I was in that group, and then some of us and some of my college friends, who I'm still tight with to this day, we started doing like what I might call like underground basement improv sessions where we would like, you know, we would get DVDs of The Reckoning performing The Herald, and we were like, oh, what's The Herald? And we would like fuck around in a basement and like get weird and stuff like that. And that kind of stuff wound up turning into an official University of Michigan improv team, which made me feel like so heartwarmed, like I sort of helped shepherd this new thing. After college, I moved out here to Los Angeles, where I immediately jumped into Upright Citizens Brigade 101, because I knew now that I loved improv and sketch comedy so much. I went through that program. I've been on a few house teams at the UCB Theater. I've been on a Herald team and a musical comedy sketch team. Done a lot of writing, performing, and music stuff there. Along the same path, I also got roped into Second City doing music direction stuff, where I would teach musical improv there. Started to learn kind of how to coach and teach, which I've been doing a decent amount. And I've also been music directing shows there. And then I've been a performer there in some premium shows as well, including the one we worked on together, Sport of White Pants.
Yeah. Same role.
Exactly. Same role. It's true. The Battle of the Garrets.
Yeah, true. And also speaking on that, it's so funny because our portrayals of Garrett are both so vastly different, which is also really wonderful. So you can always see the show more than one time.
Absolutely. It was so fun watching you perform that role. It was so like, it's totally different, and I just had a fucking ball. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it's always fun. But also that show is also great in the sense of the crew, like the writer, the director, let us play around with improv too. So every time we do the show, I noticed that more times I saw you, every time when he would like do the video games and she would yell at him and he'd run off, you would like change it a lot of times.
Yeah.
And it was always fun. And I was like, I'm stealing that one. I was like, oh, I got a new one I'm going to use. And so it was always fun to be able to see that because thanks. Yeah. I didn't have to think about anything. No, but it's great because, again, it's live theater. So we never know what's going to happen. A track might not play. The lights might go out or on at the wrong time. You know, the audience may laugh at something you weren't expecting, or they may not laugh at something you were expecting them to laugh at, and or a line may get dropped. But also with Second City specifically being this like improv to sketch concept, incorporating sketch and improv in a show is really helpful because you're able to kind of take both of those and run with it in one show. And so I think that shows a great example of kind of the inner workings of how Second City's program works, but also how it kind of combines improv, comedy, and traditional theater in its own way to tell a story, which I think is really great and is not always the case with like improv or comedy shows.
It's true. No, it is the best of both worlds where like, you know, your improv and your sketch and your comedy training help you. I think of it as like quickly making patterns on the fly. If something goes wrong or if like I'm observing something going on, I feel like sketch and improv training have trained me to make split second, here's how I think I should label what's going on and how to make it ultra specific in that moment. And then the theater side of it, which helps the comedy, is just like heart and emotion and commitment. And I think that fusing those two impulses together, you're off to the darn races.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I mean, it's like, you know, I'm not the greatest dancer. There are some heavy dance numbers in that show.
There sure are.
And they're like, you're going to be in the back as Garrett. And I'm like, great. I'm going to do this scene as Garrett. Thank you. And makes it a lot easier because as you track the story arc of these characters, Garrett dancing very well doesn't actually track his story arc.
No, it wouldn't. No.
Much more is a, look at me, I'm Garrett. Like... kind of a dancer, and that's perfect. I'm like, great. I don't need to be a good dancer. I'm good. That being said, you actually kind of touched on it a little bit, but there are so many things that you can learn in improv that you can adapt to daily life that doesn't involve acting or writing or like, you know, if you're like an IT person or you work at a grocery store, there are certain elements of improv that you can use. And we touched on like a little bit of how that flexibility is there, but what are some other things that you've noticed that you take from improv and incorporate into your everyday life?
Yeah, I think improv makes us a very keen observer, and I think it makes us kind of a more empathetic like participant in society. I feel like I can even, you know, I'll use an example like going to a coffee shop, which I did this morning, and getting an iced chai latte, and I kind of noticed that the barista was like eager to kind of like, hey, how are you? And I feel like I noticed that the way an improviser would notice a scene partner behaving quote unquote unusually or just like however they're behaving. And I kind of was able to meet her there. And it resulted in like a fun, it made a human interaction that we go through a lot funner than it had any right to be, if that makes sense. And I feel like being an improviser and studying, it is the kind of the art form of the purest way to study how another human is behaving and how to talk to that person in a productive way. And I think, you know, sometimes I deal with a lot of like person-to-person anxiety or like I don't, sometimes I feel like I worry I struggle with keeping conversations afloat or stuff like that. And in those moments, sometimes I like remind myself, you be in an improv scene for a second. And it makes it it makes it feel a little more intuitive, a little easier to meet the person exactly where they are and like help elevate whatever they have going on. And then they'll do the same. And again, off to the races.
That's great. I think also I have it's like this weird thing like in improv where I always like play a heightened version of myself versus like a character. And I'm always like, I hope I don't get judged in improv. And I'm like, why am I making myself a character if I don't want to get judged in improv? I should be like more, I think I would like feel like I should be more into doing characters. But I think the idea of treating, you know, general conversation with someone that may give you anxiety, or the situation may give you anxiety as an improv scene, where it's like, okay, the stakes are low.
True.
Even though like in real life, in that situation, in real life, the stakes are, you want to keep this client or whatever. But like in an improv scene, as an improviser, I've learned that the stakes are so low for me as an improviser, as Spencer, I have no stakes in improv at all. But in the scene, I can play with the stakes being so high no matter what it is, that these stakes are like what makes the scene and drives the scene. But knowing that I have to separate the two. Like me as Spencer has no stake, but me as Spencer as a character in the scene has the stakes set all the way to the top. And I think that idea of playing as if you're an improv scene is actually really beneficial, kind of with that mindset of like me as a person. The stakes, don't worry about the stakes, but okay, what is this character going to do? How does this character interact with this person? And treating it as that. I think that's a great way of describing it.
Yeah, and
that's what I would say.
I suppose the way you're differentiating you versus the quote unquote character, if you give yourself less stakes, it gives you more room to kind of surprise yourself, or like be a little more spontaneous or a little freer, which I think is because if you're putting undue stakes on just the way you are as a human being, which I do often, I'm very guilty of that. It's like, of course I'm going to feel a little stuck or a little anxious, or like if I do one wrong thing, the whole thing falls apart. If you can take that away, yeah, you can, I don't know, push the box a little, see what happens if you free yourself up.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. I think that's great. We kind of touched on this too, but I want to see if you have anything else you want to add to, we have this idea of like what we can use improv for, or improv skills for daily life, but what do you love about improv? Like, why do you keep doing improv, and why, I guess, why? What do you love about improv? And what keeps you coming back?
It's a big question. It's a good question.
Yeah. I mean, there's obviously not just like one answer to this question. But...
No. I do think about that a lot. And I think, at its simplest level, it's just because it's so friggin' fun. I feel to put it back to stakes, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot that I do creatively, whether it's, right now I am planning to shoot a short film. There are a lot of stakes to every decision I make about that, from what I choose to write, to what I choose to cut, to what DP I want to work with, to what actors, to et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of stuff riding on that, and it can feel a little bit less free. Not unsatisfying, but a little less free. And I think improv as an art form is so helpful because there is such a freedom and such a joy and such a spontaneity to it. And I think you can take that stuff and apply it to this other stuff, sure. But at the end of the day, I just have so much fun going up onto a stage, into a backline with a scene partner, and kind of being like, I don't need to have prepared anything, because I know we're just going to kind of fuck around and have fun for a little bit. And it's very rewarding in that present tense moment in a way that the other stuff isn't. And then the fact that it's over immediately is also very rewarding. So it's just, it's a very pure form of creative joy in a very spontaneous, kind of almost childlike way, I would say.
Yeah, that's great. I feel like I'm a big child when I do improv.
Yes, exactly.
Which is also probably why I love teaching kids improv.
Oh, yeah.
Because kids' mind, and this is a thing that I think I learned, actually, Tara Copeland, Eastwick, told me this when I was in one of her musical improv classes, is I would always bring in these notes of I teach kids improv, and I was like, what I love and what I wish I could do is have this sense of wonder that these kids have, because nothing phases them. They don't care. They don't feel like they're being judged. They'll just get in and do everything. And I was like, I wish I had this ability to do this. And in one of my notes for one of the classes, she responded to me and she said, what I want you to know is that you can do that. Mm-hmm. And you do it very well when you do it. So just know that it's not a wish. It's that you can do it. You just have to do it. Mm-hmm. And I literally went, you're right. Why did I think I couldn't do this? Because it's I guess just inherently because I was teaching kids, I was like, kids have this and kids have that. But if I think of myself of like these kids, like, improv is just like goofing around and having fun. Like that's what kids do. So it was like, if I think of it in that way, it's like, oh yeah, just think of me as like thinking like from a kid's perspective, that wonder and that awe of like everything being such a big deal, and like everything being so mysterious and interesting and fascinating, that I can build a character, I can build an emotion without really doing much, because I'm thinking from that perspective of awe and amazement. And so it was great getting that note, because I was like, oh, it's like the whole, like, you had the power to go home all along. Like,
yeah.
Like, that's how I felt. It's like, I had it. I just chose not to take my notes and put them into my perspective. I chose to be like, kids can do this. I wish I could do it. And it's like, you can. I'm like, whoa, you're right. Wow, magic. Like, and it's so interesting how, like, that seems like such a, like, for like some people it might seem like such a silly note, but for me it was like, you're literally reiterating everything I said, but from my perspective, and I would have never thought of that unless someone had mentioned that to me. I was like, oh yeah, I can do this. Yeah, why did I think I couldn't do it? And so it was just like, and so and Tara's great. So
yes, she is. Big fan.
I'm trying to get her on the show.
Oh, Tara, come on the show. It's so fun. Come on.
Yeah, she said she would do it. It's just, you know, there's a lot. Everyone's got stuff going on. So,
True.
But yeah, it's. I love her notes because she also loves to give notes on the Improv Summit Tara Copeland edition. She loves to give notes to individuals based on their level, and I think that's what's really great. It's not like oh, you know, you do a good job with playing this kind of character. Make sure you're trying to do this. But it's like she would be like, Spencer, from the last class we had to this class, this is where I saw improvement. And for you, your goals, keep working on A, B, and C. It's not like just a general overall, but it's like from this class to this class, this is where I've seen your growth. And so it helps me know, oh, I am doing something right. I am growing. I am building. And okay, let me like, my notes are never like, make sure you rhyme in your songs, because I'm not at a rhyming time. But sometimes I found it easier to rhyme when I'm not thinking about rhyming.
100%.
It just kind of happens.
Yeah.
But then, you know, I took a class, and it was at Second City, and relevant vocabulary came up. And I was like, oh, relevant vocabulary. I'm trying to get to a specific word. So if I do an A-B pattern, I just have to know what word rhymes with this. Yep. And the other two phrases literally don't matter what I say.
Correct.
Because they don't have to rhyme. It can be, or ABCB, I think is what I was going with. And so I was like, you know, and it worked out. Anyways, enough about me and my musical improv woes.
Oh no, I'm ready to get in the weeds about musical improv.
Yeah, let's go. I was gonna say, let's actually talk a little bit about musical improv and how, what's interesting to me, and you might be able to speak on this, but maybe this is a whole nother question, because this is inside my brain. I have found that I'm actually better at musical improv than regular improv, and I think it has to do a lot with me having a degree in music. But I also think that also makes it harder for me to do musical improv, because every time I sing a note that is not in the key, I'm like, oh, that was not the right note. Oh, that was not the right note. And I start
I hear you.
hammering on that, when literally it's not about the music.
Yeah.
It's about the comedy. It's about the story. It's like literally not about the notes. So I don't know what your thoughts are on like why musical improv generally comes more naturally to other people, and why it is so much more difficult for other people. Granted, people have different musical levels, but as general improvisers, if you have one improviser who's really good and another improviser who's really good, why is this improviser better at musical improv than this, regardless of their musical background? And that's a subjective question.
Well, that's interesting. There is definitely, and I've seen this a lot. I used to be the house accompanist for this show at the clubhouse called the Coconut Club, if you're familiar.
Yeah.
Where often non-musical teams would like come up and do their first musical sets, and I could just feel them be so scared of me at the piano. And I think what you mentioned about like the kind of the gate of you have to be good at music to do musical improv is a big, scary seeming gate. It affects even folks like us who have musical backgrounds. I totally relate to like, I think they're going to go to this chord, so I'm going to sing this note. It does not fit at all. What do I fucking... And then I'm in my head. But like you were talking about with Garrett dancing, it truly... The only way to win at musical improv is to try really hard, right? So I feel like a lot of people get so afraid of committing to something so hard that feels so intimidating. But the only way to kind of bust through it is to commit anyway, and to just do it anyway, and to not sound good, and that's okay. Because ultimately, to me, the biggest kind of, and I try often to intersect musical improv and straight improv as explicitly as possible. I try to find exactly how they're common. But I think the biggest difference comes from the idea of planting your feet and being still in musical improv. Once you find what your song is going to be about, in my opinion, the anding of yes and kind of stops. It's time to stop adding stuff to it. It's time to live in this one moment and sing about this one thing and go deeper rather than wide. And I think in a lot of improv, straight improv, that feels unintuitive. It feels funner to keep anding, to keep adding, to keep doing stuff. And it feels a little scary to like trust yourself to live in this one moment, so much so that you are going to sing a whole ass song about it. In my opinion, I think I like to try and track like the thing you're singing a song about to my UCB training kicking in, the game of the scene. Musical improv is just take your game moves and sing about them instead. But I think for a lot of folks, there is that weird gulf to get over. And I try very hard whenever I do musical improv or coach it to other people or coach it to like improvisers who have not done it before, to smush that gulf as much as possible and be like, it's the same thing except you sing. That's it. Something like that.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing to know is, as much as I love to sing the right pitches, you actually don't have to be a singer to do musical improv. You don't have to have any musical background at all, and that's also the beauty of a lot of teams. Is you have a lot of teams that have like all like really good singers who can like really like harmonize and do notes, and you've got a lot of teams that have like no one that can sing. But then you have those teams that are a good mix where you have people who clearly can sing solo pieces, but then other people who are much better at doing character ensemble-y type numbers. And that's a great balance that you have with different levels of skill within the musical realm. And so I think that that's something that people often tend to forget, is you don't have to be a good singer to do musical improv or even be able to keep a beat. That's the endearing part of it all.
Absolutely. And I think musical improv, more than regular improv, has a lot of structure and a lot of formula. And I think that people who have a musical background, who come into it being like, yeah, verse, chorus, bridge, chorus. I know it has to be that, and it has to be this certain way. So I think often someone who doesn't have that background can kind of like kick around and fuck around with it more in a way that's very satisfying and very surprising and very like, oh, let's fuck around and have fun. So like, to this imaginary person I'm talking to who's struggling with signing up for their first musical improv class, get in there, fuck around, have fun.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love it. Do you have any, transitioning into a whole nother unrelated topic, maybe it's related, I don't know, we'll see. Do you have any plugs or pitches you want to, do you have any plugs or pitches you want to share for links that we'll put in the YouTube description?
Oh, sure. Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at SmithLGreg. Yeah, you can just keep up with me there. That's all I got. Yeah.
Great. And I'm sure if you got stuff, you'll pop it on there anyway, so people can definitely stay in touch with what's going on and when and how and why and where. And
why is a big one. Who knows?
Yeah. Why you're doing what you're doing. Anyway, Greg, thanks so much for joining me here on the Improv Summit. The last question I have for you is the reason why the Improv Summit ultimately exists. And that is because before pandemic, but even now with improv essentially being accessible from anywhere in the world, people are like, oh, Spencer, you do so much improv. Where should I take improv? And it makes me kind of freak out for a second because I'm like, I don't know how to answer that question without really breaking down like every place that has improv or like why improv exists. What is your point with improv? But if someone came up to you and said, Greg, where should I take improv? What would be one piece of advice or one tidbit you'd give to someone to help guide them on their improv journey?
I would tell this person to be willing to look at it like a series of awkward failures. I feel like a lot of times it's almost like a workout, right? Whenever I work out, I don't always feel good at the end. I don't always feel like, boy, I could go play a pickup game with Michael Jordan or whatever. I'm like, oh, my arms are weirdly sore. That feels weird. And I feel like improv classes and an improv journey are kind of like working on one specific body part or specific muscle at a time. And I feel like I like to track improv to basketball for whatever reason. And I feel like...
I love a good analogy on this show.
Oh, hey, analogous, baby.
Yeah.
I love the idea that like an improv class or an improv coaching session or rehearsal is like a very specific drill. Where, as you said, the stakes are very low. If you kind of mess up a drill in front of your teacher or your classmates, I don't know, maybe you'll feel a little embarrassed, but everyone's going to mess up that drill, right? It's a drill. It's a new thing you're learning. Eventually, you'll work your way up to playing games, basketball games, where there's more room to, like, fuck around and get your legs and have fun and try alley-oops and shit like that. So I guess my ultimate advice is, like, don't be afraid to think of the beginnings of an improv journey or any improv class as just, like, one sort of isolated incident and one thing you are working on. Something like that, I guess.
Yeah, that's great. I will say I also love a good sports analogy. For whatever reason, I don't always understand. I mean, not that I don't understand sports analogies, but for whatever reason, improv and sports analogies, like that makes perfect sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why it is. I think it's also because of Holly Laurent. I've said this story on this show before, but I would be so focused on backline support that I would never jump out into scenes. And people are like, you got to come out and see it. I'm like, just pull me out. Like, if you pull me out, on, like, literally grab me by the hand and pull me out to do a scene. Because I'm just so focused on the backline that I forget to go out. And what Holly said was, she said, think of it as being on a court. You have, when you're in the back line, you're playing on the court. And when you're in the scene, you're on the bench. And I literally went, what? Because you're doing a lot more of the work in the back line than you are actually. When you're in the scene, you're just like playing. You're having a good time. You're playing. But on the back line, you're actually like really in, like, as if you're playing on the court, because you have to figure out the edits. You got to figure out what to bring back. You got to support your teammates, do a walk-on if it's necessary. There's all these things you have to be prepared for. So it is almost more to think about when you're in the back line, which my brain is very suited to that. But I was like, in that moment, I was like, oh, this also helped with my confidence, being like, oh, I can do this in the back line. That's hard. If that's hard, I can do that. Then this is going to be real easy for me to get on stage and do a scene. It made it a lot easier in that way for me too, because I was like, oh, great. Then I've conquered the easy part. Conquered the hard part, and I just got to do the easy part. So if that's the easy part, then I got it. No problem.
God, I love that framing. I love that shifting.
Yeah,
it's really cool. Yeah.
That was like one of my last levels at IO, which, I mean, they've been closed for a few years now. So it's like, I remember that from several years ago at this point. But yeah, that's just, food for thought. Basketball analogies and improv mix really well. So, well, Greg, thanks so much for joining me here on the Improv Summit. I did say that was the last question for you, but as always on this show, I'm kind of a big liar.
Wow.
So I know it's
your regular Paul Giamatti.
I know.
A big fat liar.
I've used that joke on this show.
Have you? Well.
I have, but I've said it multiple times. I'll do it again. Now I started saying that I'm a true Pinocchio, except my nose doesn't grow because I tell people I'm gonna lie.
I guess self-aware Pinocchio, he would cut it off at the pass.
Yeah, exactly. But that being said, we've been talking a lot about improv. You want to do some improv?
Yep.
Let's do it. All right, let's do some improv. Now, as we know through all these interviews and through improv in general, improv is very vast with the types of improv there are. So what I want to do is I want to do a scene that is completely based on a very vague suggestion. And by vague, I mean very vague. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to post a word in the chat, and I want you to read it out loud, and we will go from there.
Great. Of. So now what we're going to do is we're just going to choose, would you like to initiate or do you want me to initiate? After you.
Great. All right. So I will initiate based on the suggestion of. Thank you. I got to be honest. The best book of all time is Agatha Christie's novel or novella, I guess, if you will, Of Mice and Men. Like, maybe she didn't even write that, but Of Mice and Men is definitely the best novel I've ever read.
Brody, if you're going to talk to me about classic literature, I need you to fucking know your facts, okay? Of Mice and Men is written by John Steinbeck.
That's right. He also wrote The Moon is Down. I read that book.
The fucking moon is... What are we talking about here? Are we talking about...
The Grapes of Wrath. Maybe that's the book I'm thinking of. The Grapes of Wrath.
Yeah, of course it is, Brody. The Grapes of Wrath is a great American treatise on how we treat our poor and how capitalism is going to rot us and how only the love of a mother is going to... Know your fucking literature before you come talking to your brother, Brody.
Sorry, Steve. I think that The Moon is Down was also written by John Steinbeck. I can't shake that fact.
That's fine. I don't know what The Moon is Down is.
It's a book. It has like a seafoam green bluish kind of cover, and then there's like a war photo on the front, black and white photo. It's like 200 pages, give or take. I'm pretty sure it's by John Steinbeck.
Pretty sure. The two of us are given a speech honoring our father who's retiring from Oxford, right? The most fucking well-regarded English literature professor in all of in the past, I don't know, however long he's been there. And you think you know that a book called The Moon is Down, you think you remember the cover.
Yeah, no, I definitely remember the cover. Whether it's The Moon is Down or not is a whole...
You're not even sure on the
question,
title. You've walked back being sure on the title.
I think it's called The Moon is Down. I don't know what it's about, but I could like look it up and see if I think that it's a thing. But okay,
the purpose of our speech is to compare our dad to the best book ever written, to say he's even better. How can we do that if we're starting from a place of you're not even sure what the book is about, you're not even sure what the book is called, you're not even sure what the book looks like. You thought Agatha Christie wrote Of Mice and Men. What's next? You think fucking Hemingway wrote A is for Alibi, some shit?
Well, Three Blind Mice, though. Someone wrote that. Was that Poirot? Hercule Poirot.
I just want to walk through this horrible sentence you've just said. You think that Three Blind Mice, which to my knowledge is a nursery rhyme, was written by the fictional detective Hercule Poirot. That's what you're asserting to me, Brody.
Yeah, that's correct.
You think a fictional detective wrote a nursery rhyme?
Yeah, well, I think it's the name of a book, too. Like a murder mystery book, Three Blind Mice.
Are you thinking of a book whose title I don't even want to say out loud because I am genuinely uncomfortable with it? That is by Agatha Christie, yes. 10 little and then a bad term to describe a group of people.
No, that's not the one.
Well, then what's
Three Blind Mice?
That's a nursery
rhyme.
Three Blind
Men? Is there Three Blind Men? Is that...
Now I see what's going on. You're taking Of Mice and Men and you're combining them into two separate books. You're all over the place. We need to focus in on our dad.
And then there were none. That's what I'm thinking of.
That is an Agatha Christie novel. That's true. I feel a little weird bringing up the bad one now.
Well, I don't even know which one that is. All I know is And Then There Were None was written by Agatha Christie. But then who wrote Three Blind Mice?
It's just a nursery rhyme. It's just a traditional nursery rhyme.
Who wrote it?
I don't know. Who writes nursery rhymes? They just exist.
Did John Steinbeck write it?
Probably not. Okay, probably not.
Probably not. See, now you're not sure.
Oh, fuck. You're getting in my head, Brody.
Just saying.
What is this speech going to be about?
We could talk about John Steinbeck novels.
Yeah,
I know The Grapes of Wrath is for sure by John Steinbeck.
It is, but did Pops really like Steinbeck? What would he say about Steinbeck? Didn't he say it was kind of predictable?
Did he read The Moon is Down?
I don't know. Why are you hung up on this one particular book?
I really just want to remember when it was was it around when Dad was around? When was it written? I guess is really now I want to know. 42, 67? When did John Steinbeck write his other novels? 1949? There was a movie, Grapes of Wrath, that came out in 1949, right?
Yeah, John Ford, Henry Fonda.
Yeah, it must have been written before then.
Yeah, I feel like it must have been written before then. That tracks. You're throwing out... We're not trying to come up with the Wikipedia facts about John Steinbeck novels. We're trying to write a very heartfelt speech about a dad who's retiring.
We can say that he loved a lot of books of all different genres and authors.
Great,
and then just list a bunch of authors and a bunch of genres.
You just think for our heartfelt speech, you just want to list authors and genres?
You could say, Dad was a professor of many words, but spoke not a lot. And then you can say something like, he loved books like the classics, like Three Blind Mice, Of Mice and Men.
Not a book.
And Then There Were None, The Moon is Down, and also
Still not sure that's a book.
Such as authors such as Moby Dick, Jules Verne.
Moby Dick is not an author, it's the title of a book.
Well, then Captain Ahab wrote it. That's fine.
Captain...
It's like Treasure
Brody,
Island.
you're still mad at our dad, I can tell. You're still mad. Just talk it out. What's going on?
He just likes you better.
Yeah, obviously. I care about the stuff he's doing. What else?
I didn't really find a connection with any of the books that he liked.
Well, now I do feel earnestly bad. What?
Well, it's the importance of being earnest is that you let it out.
Fuck you, Brody. Scene.
Thanks so much for coming to the Improv Summit. I'm Spencer. That's Greg. See you next time. Bye.